However, before we get into the video, I want to talk about the second half of this video. This is the first iteration of this build. The second half of this build is better. This one's just a alternate build. The second build variation of this is much better. It's a little bit more complicated. I wouldn't recommend it if you are trying to keep things really simple. If you are trying to make things a little bit more complicated but better, go to the second half and the end of this video, about middle way, and it's the second variation, which is the better variation. All right, and now with that, I'll get into the video. All right, so this is a mod and skill crit focused build. So you notice a lot of these rings are increasing my crit chance and crit damage, and when I crit, I get cooldown. I'm using Nebula for just a little bit more cooldown and a little bit more passive damage. Melee weapon kind of doesn't matter, you can kind of use whatever you want. I use Hunter's Spear just for the dot damage over time, and it also reduces the skill cooldown. It's better to be a thrown weapon, generally speaking. And Spore Bloom is literally just to slow enemies and do like a little bit of damage. It really doesn't do a lot of damage. And this is a Life Leech build. You can use Tranquil Heart. Either one is perfectly fine. As you can see, a lot of my stats here, just a general overview of it. We're going to be using Havok form as our primary damage dealer. And Way of Keula also helps increase our damage and our clearing ability. Also, while you have your Invoker active, you actually heal a percent of your health every 3 seconds, which it's not much, but it's something. And of course, every time you cast a spell, or skill, sorry, I should say, it reduces your skill cooldowns by 10%, which is really important for this build since you don't have a lot of cooldown. Now, crit damage, crit chance, pretty straightforward, and then the mod cast speed for Havok. Casting speed damage, skill damage, just like for the Prism, skill crit, cast speed, and cooldown. Those are all super helpful things. And the primary legendary is going to be that 35% all crit chance, which you need to be in lightweight. Now here is the boss fights. So even though this isn't the best variation of this build, it is very simple. You don't need to have a lot of uptime with a lot of your mod skills, or your mod abilities, I should say. Most of the time, it's not really going to make or break the build. And same with the second variation. The second variation just has a little bit more DPS, but it requires a few more setup of your mods and doing a few things to optimize your damage if you really want to get as much damage as you can out of it. But with that said, you really don't need to do this. You can use this build and be perfectly content with everything. You're really not going to have too much of an issue. As you can see, this has elemental resistance, so I'm doing technically less damage to this target. I'm doing a considerable amount of damage considering he has elemental resistance, which decreases my damage quite dramatically.
Subscribe or else. Go on, do it. Subscribe. I kinda sound like the guy from Skyrim with the armor Infidium.
Here they come.
Seriously, subscribe. Seriously.
So as you can see with this boss is getting melted very quickly, and I didn't really open with an optimized opener. I didn't activate my Nebula, and I didn't activate my Spore Bloom, which isn't super intensive for damage. Usually you just use it for ads. The damage is so minimal that it's not really required. You could use anything else in place of the Spore Bloom if you want. If for some reason you are out of Archon charges, it's important to cast Way of Keula, but save them. So don't spam them. You want to use Way of Keula simply to recharge your Archon charges, because you want to have as much uptime as possible, and it is possible to have a very long uptime where the boss is going to be end up basically dead no matter what. So it's important to save Way of Kaula, the thing that causes the thunderstorm and the rain. Make sure you use that until you have 2 charges of Archon, but then stop using it. Because that's the thing that really lets you regenerate a lot of your skill cooldown and get back to your actual damage dealing part of the build. With the other variation of this build, it's going to create a little bit more flexibility if for some reason you don't have your Archon or your Way of Kaula back for some reason. You'll be using a little bit of your mod damage to actually deal some significant amount of damage considering. So this is really a mod and skill build, which is important to note. Alright, this is the second variation. So it's pretty much the same stuff, generally speaking. You're still building crit. The only thing that's changing out is that you're using different mods. And these mods do considerable amount of damage. I tried to find mods that scaled with crit and crit damage, because a lot of mods actually don't crit. So I tried to find mods that actually crit, and it actually ended up working out really, really well, because mod scales with crit damage and crit chance, of course. And of course, so does skill damage of Way of Kaula, as well as Archon. And of course, reducing 1% of your cooldown every 1 second, every 3 seconds, helps you get those skill cooldowns. So it's important to have Way of Kaula up a lot of the time, because you want to get Havok farm as your main damage dealer. Also, a lot of people don't really know this. This is a really good support build too, simply because if you just hold right click, you get 50% damage reduction. So there's a point in time where, like, if you're the team, if they're taking too much damage, just hold right click near them and they'll be safe. There's nothing different about this part of the build. It's going to be crit chance and crit damage and mod speed. That's how you do damage with your skill. Pretty standard stuff: skill damage, cast speed, crit chance, and cooldown. If you can get a little bit more cooldown in some way, if using a concoction, that's totally fine. And the 35% crit chance, as before, great for this build. So what's funny here is that I can't actually damage this boss with my Archon Lightning. So you'll notice I don't even use my Archon Lightning to kill her, which is really hilarious. So you notice here I'm trying to, like, find where she is, and I think again you get like a couple lightning bolts on her, if you want to call it that. So I was just like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm going to do here. But I look at her health and she's basically already halfway. And that's just simply because the lightning strikes crit really, really hard and do a lot of damage. Now, I should be shooting that orb to do the most amount of damage. But if you look, I'm doing completely fine. Only let her take damage from a little bit of my mod and the lightning strike. So this kind of shows just how powerful this can be and how easy it can be, even if you aren't using your primary damage dealer. Now, there are certain bosses where this mod might not be great. The one that you shoot down the flasks, the acid flasks. A lot of the time, I didn't think I could make it work, but for a boss like this, you can actually make it work pretty well. If you put them in a spot where he's going to be, like the middle, which he pretty much always is, when he goes through his phases, it's really easy to put it on the ground and let it do its full amount of damage very quickly. So this is important to note. He also has elemental resistance, and I don't need to dodge because I just heal so fast. Life leech on this is really amazing simply because I'm doing so much damage so quickly and so many hits of damage. Single hits of damage are a little bit harder time reaching, but something like this where it's this constant damage, you heal so quickly. You can usually shrug off a lot of attacks. Now here, this guy has a lot of health and he has thick skin. I'm going to try to deal as much damage as I can with the proper rotation. So what you want to do first is the flask, and then you're going to shoot your, you'll take ball, and you're supposed to shoot it. I missed out, but after that you cast Wave of Kaula, and then Archon Lightning, and then you just spam. There is an optimized way to increase your damage. A lot of people won't end up probably doing it, but you have to drop Lightning right here, just like this, and make sure your mods stay up. Now, as I said, I didn't shoot my orb to maximize damage, but I'm still doing a considerable amount of damage considering he's already halfway dead the first few seconds of the encounter. And as you can see, he's almost dead. I almost make it one phase, which is pretty impressive, especially for a Havok though. Sadly, I don't. But this phase is extremely easy for a build like this, just because you look in the direction and you just hold down the trigger. And a lot of the time it's really awesome because you can use your flasks to protect you. You can also use your orb, which has a humongous radius for dealing damage. It is really an incredible mod that people really don't give enough credit to, just because of its radius and its duration can be so crazy. Now this rotation is completely fine. It's not the most perfect rotation of DPS. What you would do is shoot that orb and then in that rotation. It's the only part of that rotation that I'm missing, but it's still doing good damage regardless. And for boss rush mods, you really want to just get skill damage, any crit chance, and crit damage. Those are the real ones you really want to focus on. And of course, as always with every boss rush, you always want to have things that keep you alive in your boss rushes, of course, like health, damage reduction, and other things that would mitigate damage. Even movement speed isn't that bad, especially if it helps you run away from certain boss mechanics to re-engage. So for the first one, the flask, it does a big amount of burst if you let all of them hit simultaneously. For certain bosses, this will be easier or harder. So for the lightning orb, you'll actually be doing a lot more damage, about 50% more damage when you shoot it. But if you don't shoot it, this is what the damage is going to be. Now, if you see when you do shoot it, there is an actual increase of damage and radius of its attack. And then with the lightning, it's sitting for 3k, and you gotta remember this is what you're gonna be doing when you hit a boss. And with the acid effect, with 10% increased damage of Flask, you'll be doing even more damage. So here, with the base damage of Archon, you're doing about 2k. If you're hitting 2 targets on certain bosses where that is absolutely possible, you'll be doing 4,000 damage. Also, this is really good for killing ads. You're basically never going to be bothered by any type of ad ever. Even though this is basically going around 4k burst, this isn't really representing the actual DPS of it, because every time that lightning strike happens, it's only doing like a fifth of the damage, which isn't that much when you consider that it'd be striking for 3k damage plus, you know, an extra 10%. It'll be doing a lot more damage every lightning strike. The DPS might be even around 6k with the proper rotation. All right, that's the end of the video. If you guys want to check out some more videos, I have some more on my YouTube for Remnant. I'm also going to be doing some more content, essentially with some Helldivers and some Ready or Not and whatever other game I'm going to be playing. So thanks for watching.